In Season 1 we met a very interesting Spurd, probably the only Spurd left on the demon continent, Ruijerd Spurdia. For demon kind, you could often tell what tribe or race they were from by looking at their surname. Another example is Roxy Migurdia from the Migurd tribe. Ruijerd has lived longer than 500 years. When Rudius asked him how old he was, he said he lost track after 500. Spurds have extremely long lifespans, the highest we've seen in the series. Probably the only other race that comes close are elves or dragon race that live approximately several hundred years or more. The Spurds all have common features that make them easy to distinguish. First is their green hair. Although we haven't seen other races that have green hair, we've seen people instead, like Sophie or the guy from the second season. Having green hair is extremely unusual in the whole world if you're not a Spurd. That's why Sophie stood out and was bullied by the other kids. I'm sure in the demon continent there should be a tribe that has green hair and who are not Spurds. There just has to be, because there's just so many different looking demons and probabilities not low. Second, they have the red jewel on their forehead, but it's not decoration. It's referred to as their third eye. It can sense the presence of mana, therefore other living beings in their vicinity. Because in Mushoku Tensei, everything has mana, so this third eye is essentially their sonar detector. When Eris was about to go swimming, Ruijerd stopped her because the ocean was full of monsters. This was one such example of the third eye we saw in the series. Next we have their spears. If you watched the series and were curious about what the spear was made from, it's actually Spurd. No, they don't transform into spears, but when a Spurd is born, they have a 3-pointed tail. As they get older, the tail gets longer and harder until it falls off. It's also one of the most durable materials that we see in the series, and the Spurds think of their spears as their soul, just like how in the Japanese samurai era, they used to say their katana are their soul. Lastly, we have their traditional clothes. It has a distinct look which makes it easy to identify them. Okay, so finally onto the downfall of the Spurds. This part was in volume 3 of the light novel and was cut out from the anime, so it's not spoilers, it's a history lesson. The terrain, climate, and everything about the demon continent is extremely poor when compared to Melis or the central continent. It doesn't rain, high-level monsters roaming everywhere, no good areas of vegetation, etc. The demons felt denied and discriminated against. Demon god Laplace rallied the demons to claim other western lands and eliminate the humans. The Spurd tribe joined him very early and had a closer relationship to him, being viewed as Laplace's personal forces. They were one of the strongest demon tribes. Their specialties were night attacks, and due to their third eye, they could fight in the dark just as well in the day. So whilst the enemy forces are holding torches or unable to see, the Spurds just carry on as usual and eliminate their foes. At this point in history, they were famous amongst the demons for being these badasses. During the Laplace War, when they had just started invading the central continent, Laplace called the Spurds and gave them these black spears to use instead of their own. Some of the Spurds refused, saying that the spear is a part of their soul. But since Ruijerd was the tribe leader and pledged his allegiance to Laplace, he ordered everyone to use the black spears. From a glance, you could tell that there was something evil about these spears, but what could they do? After the Spurds started using these in combat, they noticed their power levels multiplied. And not only did you have these literal combat monsters coming after you, but their new black spears could nullify magic and heighten their senses even further. I'm honestly getting uncomfortable imagining how the humans would have dealt with this. One of the great things about Mushoku Tensei is that you could make another series just based off the history. So this Laplace War could be turned into an anime and easily have like 3 or 5 seasons and be binge worthy. From here on, things start to go downhill. The more blood the spears were exposed to, the more the user would lose their sanity. It was happening slowly over time. So in your squadron, there wasn't a person who lost their mind before the others. It was happening to all of them at the same time, bit by bit. No one noticed. Over time, Spurs in combat were unable to spot friend from foe and killed everyone on sight, regardless of gender or age. This means during the war, even fellow demons were getting killed by the Spurs. So the other demons started calling them bloodthirsty monsters, but they didn't care. They had enemies on both the demon and the human side now. After some time, a false rumor came that one of their villages was being attacked. This one in particular was Ruijerd's home, but it was a trap the other demons planned to wipe them all out. Unknowingly, they went back in hopes of defending it, but like I said, once they found anything that was a living being, they would kill it. Ruijerd's wife, parents, children, and the entire village was killed by the Spurs themselves. Ruijerd's son managed to break his father's black spear, but died in the process. After Ruijerd came to his senses, he realized he had something in his mouth. When he took it out and had a look, it was his son's finger, which is absolutely brutal. The first thing he thought was suicide. It seemed like there was nothing left in this world anymore, but he quickly dismissed the idea because he knew he had to take revenge against Laplace before he could die. Out of the 200 spurred warriors, only 10 remained. Ruijerd broke all of their black spears to snap them out of the trance. Upon closer inspection, they were all bruised and battered. One was missing a limb, another an eye, someone a jewel, and so on. Even then, an enemy army was approaching. Their numbers at least 1,000 soldiers. The superb warriors stood and faced them head on. Ruijerd managed to make his way through, run and survive. He thinks the others are most likely dead. He spent 3 days on the verge of death from all the wounds, but he knew he couldn't die yet. He needed to avenge his tribe and kill Laplace. All he had left was his son's spear. He spent several years in hiding, and he waited and waited for the perfect moment to attack. Until one day, the 3 heroes from the human side were facing off against Laplace. Ruijerd used this opportunity to launch a sneak attack and help kill Laplace. After defeating him, Ruijerd became close friends with the other 3 heroes. They would be known as the Sword God, Water God, and the North God of those times. Ruijerd thought the next thing to do would be to fix the spurred reputation around the world, because literally everyone in the world hated spurs. There probably wasn't even one species in Mushoku Tensei that hadn't heard about spurs and their horrible acts during the war. Obviously, as we know, stories are like Chinese whispers and get blown out of proportion. So nowadays, spurs are known as this legend of these monsters that eat children. After the end of the war, the spurs were attacked ferociously, driven away from their homeland, and scattered across the world. Ruijerd assumes that there is a secret spurred village across the world where they live quietly. He also hasn't seen another spurred in over 300 years. So after the anime ends, you may be thinking he goes back to the demon continent, right? Wrong. He started exploring the central continent based on stories and other rumors, which may be other spurts. The man just wants to find his people again. That definitely pulls some heartstrings.